That evening, the owner told the foreman to call the workers in and pay them, beginning with the last workers first. When those hired at 5 o'clock were paid, each received a full day's wage. When those hired first came to get their pay, they assumed they would receive more. But they too were paid a day's wage. When they received their pay, they protested to the owner. Those people worked only 1 hour, and yet you've paid them just as much as you paid us, who worked all day in the scorching heat. The owner answered one of them, "Friend, I haven't been unfair. Didn't you agree to work all day for the usual wage? Take your money and go. I wanted to pay this last worker the same as you. Is it against the law for me to do what I want with my money? Should you be jealous because I am kind to others? So those who are last now will be first then, and those who are first will be last."
Fun fact, I'm a rabbit farmer. And this year it's rabbits and goats. Leah's branching out. And I want to talk to you today about a time when God met me. God meets me all the time, but specifically in raising livestock. Now, this life did not come naturally at all to me. Not at all. I am a city girl. I grew up inside Loop 410 in San Antonio, the urban core of the city. I didn't even know you could raise rabbits as livestock. I thought they were only kind of exotic pets. But then the bishop moved me to Spicewood, Texas, which is kind of a mix of it's rural outside of a big city. And while we were there, my daughter Leah, my middle child, who has always been interested in animals, met the local veterinarian. He's one of the lay leaders at my church. And Dr. Matt invited Leah to come to his clinic on Saturdays. She was in the summer between second grade and third grade. Every Saturday, Leah got to go to the clinic and help Dr. Matt. She helped him draw up medicines. She observed him when he was interacting with the dogs and the cats and all the animals that came. She even got to sit in on some surgeries. This is the benefit of living in the country, you guys, is that you have these opportunities for little kids to go shadow veterinarians when they're in second grade. So near the end of the summer, Leah bounces out of the clinic one Saturday and says to us, "Dr. Matt says that I can raise and show rabbits if you will just get me into 4-H. Okay. And I thought, well, this is my little girl's passion, but do they really let third graders raise and show rabbits? Is that something we could do? And Leah is certain Dr. Matt has talked to her about this. She can do it. So she just says, call Dr. Matt. And I said to her, if this is true, you can do it. We'll figure it out. Well, I called Dr. Matt, and it's true. They do let third graders raise and show rabbits. So there you go. We got rabbits. And I now have years of experience from third grade now to freshman year raising rabbits, so I can tell you how to do it. But that first year, clueless. Utterly clueless. Both Kevin and I, no experience in FFA, no experience in 4-H, city folk, okay? So from experience now, I can tell you some of the things you don't want to do with your show rabbits if you want them to succeed and thrive. A random sampling. You do not want to make a fun obstacle course in the front yard so your bunnies can enjoy it. You don't want to put them in a purse and take them to meet the neighborhood. You don't want to introduce them to your best friend or your dog or your little brother. You don't want to take them into your bed and snuggle them at night. You don't want to invite them inside for a movie night. You don't want to take them down the slide on your swing set. you especially don't want to put them into a bucket tied to a rope and raise it to the top of the treehouse so that they can enjoy the beautiful view. I knew that last one. But the sad thing is that Leah's show rabbits in her first year experienced all of those delights and so much more. So it was a rather doomed process from the beginning if you wanted to make auction. Because what show rabbits need is to be meaty and strong and very, very calm, just to sit there on the table while the judge examines them. And to run them through all of these things is going to terrorize them, make them lose weight, and make them crazy rabbits. So I knew we didn't know what we were doing. Okay, I wasn't naive enough to think, oh, we're doing this great. This obstacle course is really going to do the trick. So I started reaching out to my church family, kind of desperately. Anyone I could talk to, I would say, we're trying to raise these show rabbits, and we don't know what we're doing. Do you know anyone who knows what they're doing? And eventually I said that enough that a preschool teacher heard me, and she said, my brother knows what he's doing, and he goes to this church sometimes, and I'll send him over. So our now good friend, Derek Harding, who we hadn't met yet, came over one day, and joy of joys, got to see the bunny obstacle course in action. Now, Derek has a ton of experience raising rabbits and goats and sheep and everything. And so he started asking Kevin and I questions. What kind of protein's in your feed? What's your rigor? I mean, you just named the questions that he was asking, and Kevin and I were standing there like, we don't know. And Derek quickly realized that the most competent person raising the rabbits was actually the third grader, and so he started asking Leah questions. And I'll never forget him ending with this question. He said, okay, Leah, what is your goal with these rabbits? Do you want to win? Do you want to go to auction? Or are you just wanting to have some fun? And Leah thought about it, and she said, Mr. Derek, I just want to have fun. And so Derek said, well, you're doing a great job. Just keep doing what you're doing. And that was that. So the day of the show, we get the rabbits loaded up in their pen, and we drive all the way an hour across the county to where the show barn is. And there lined up are hundreds of competitors. Hundreds. And they are mostly middle school and high school students. And there's only a smattering of elementary school kids like Leah. So Leah's tiny in this line of adult-looking people. And she has to wait a long time, but finally she gets up to the judge. And the judge has her open the cage and put the rabbit there. And then the judge starts flipping the rabbits over and vet checking them and examining them and, testing them to see how their muscles are. And Kevin and I are looking at each other like, oh, that's how you hold a rabbit. So expertly, not like, oh, baby. So we figured that out that day. He checks all the rabbits, he lines them up, he looks at them, makes a few notes on his cards. Leah puts them back in the pen and is asked to put them on the sawdust floor of the show ring with all the other rabbits. And then we wait, and the judge finishes checking the other 50 or 60 competitors. There were 120 that year. And finally, after about another hour, he's compiled all his results, he's put them in an order. And they say, if you're showing rabbits, it's over the loudspeaker, get back to the ring because it's about to begin. So we all gather with hundreds and hundreds of spectators. Everybody who has a kid who is showing rabbits. All around this huge sawdust floor show ring, giant. And Derek has made the hour drive. He took a day off work. He made the hour drive to come support Leah and to tell us what was going on. So he leans over and says to us, you don't want to be called first because the first ones called are the first ones that are sent home. You're eliminated. So we wait with the expectation that she's going to get called first because these are the rabbits that went up into the treehouse. Well, the judge calls the first group, but we don't hear Leah's number. This is better than we ever hoped we'd do, you guys. So we're delighted because we are not the worst. Sometimes it's great to be not the worst. Calls the next group. Leah's not in it. He calls the next group. And my heart was beating so fast. All of us were, right? We're just so on edge. He doesn't call Leah's number. So she's in the last group as best we could tell, right? Because we're counting. Derek's over here saying, I can't believe this. She might actually have a shot. So the last group is called, and Leah gets her rabbits. She gets to go in, get her rabbits, this giant cage, and this little kid. Somebody helps her. She puts the rabbits in the pen, and she stands there, ramrod straight, looking at the judge. She's, this big compared to all the kids that are so much bigger. She can barely see over the rabbit cage. And he starts dismissing people, and Leah's still standing there. And Derek leans over to us and says, this is hard to believe, but they're about to start handing out ribbons. And if she gets a ribbon, she will probably go to auction. Y'all, I have never cheered for 25th place so loudly in my entire life. 25th place is what Leah got, and it meant she would go to the auction. Just barely. She was second to last, but she was going to go. So we're cheering and high-fiving and taking all these pictures. 25th place! Hold up your ribbon! Dr. Matt, we're texting him on the phone. He's like, bring the rabbits by. After the show, Leah gets her favorite rabbit, and she's got her ribbon, and they take a picture, and Dr. Matt blows the picture up and frames it, and it is still in his clinic to this day. 25th place. So excited because it was such a moment of grace, right? We did not deserve that. We didn't know what we were doing. It was pure grace, right? And a good breeder. And so the day of the auction, which is just a week later, we make the drive out again to the other side of the county. And we watch the auction. It's our first livestock auction, and they auction steer and goats and sheep and pigs and chickens and turkeys. And finally, at the very end of the day, at 5 o'clock, they get to the rabbits. They always start with the grand champion and work their way down the list. And so it was the very end of the auction. The last group of animals, the very worst pens, right, when Leah's getting called. And people are starting to shut their chairs, and they're starting to gather up their bags and get ready to go. And I'm thinking, oh, please just stay a little longer, just a little bit, because this is Leah. So Leah stands up there, 25th place, and those the buyers, the sponsors, bid on her rabbits, her 25th place pen of rabbits. And I was blown away. She got almost $1,000 from these sponsors, these generous donors. And Leah's eyes just pop, like all of us. Oh my gosh. She has not just enough to pay for her rabbits this year, but to pay for them next year, and to get them a better cage, and to do the things she's been wanting to do, and to save some for college in 3rd grade. It was incredible. So Leah bounces off the stage to go thank her buyers. This is where I met God, because there was one kid after Leah. His name was Trevor. He was in our 4-H, so in our same group. 26th place of rabbits, right? The worst place of rabbits, the last animal, the very least, okay? And so my expectation is, well, a couple $100, right? It might get up to 1,000 like ours. I just was blown away by that. But the bidding got high, and then it got higher, and then it got higher. And it was just ridiculous. Like, everybody's bidding on this 26th last place rabbit pen. Until finally the auctioneer says, we got to stop because it's going to go over the reserve grand champion. You can't do that. So the bidding stops on these rabbits at something like $3,600. More than a lot of the goats, more than a lot of the sheep, more than a lot of the pigs. Those are harder animals to raise. Just this incomparable amount of money for the last place of rabbits. And my shock and lack of understanding had to have shown on my face, because the woman next to me says, oh, this is your first auction, but you don't know that last place can sometimes be great because the buyers know how much money their company's given them to spend. And if they haven't spent it, they'll put it all on the last place. Just really bless the last place. Isn't that cool? And I'm thinking, why didn't they do second to last as well as the last place? You know, they could have just spread it out among the worst. And that's when I met God at a livestock auction. Because all my life I have read the scripture, the last will be first and the first will be last. But God just laid it on my heart. The last will be first. I felt it in my gut. I got it in this new way. It wasn't exactly the story that Jesus was telling about the landowner that was read this morning by Miss Leanne and the kids. But I felt I was living it out. Like I was a character in that story, and God had a lesson for me and for you, for all of us in that moment. Because the point of that story is that God doesn't play favorites. That if you get to the vineyard, to God's family, early in the day, if you came when you were 6 years old, you are blessed and you are welcome. And if you didn't get into God's family until you were 76, you're not less. You're blessed and you're welcome equally. If you have your whole life worked to live according to God's teaching, you are blessed. What a blessed life. But if you have totally screwed up your life, if it's a train wreck behind you and you drag yourself in the 11th hour, right? If you're last place and you still come to God, you are blessed. There's no second class citizens. There's actually no places with God, right? Well, first place and 26th place. You're here. You're home. You're blessed. And I saw that in the way the buyers treat last place. They honor it, right? Everybody else goes, oh, you just barely clawed your way in. And the buyers say, well done. Well done, last of the last. You made it. But it wasn't just that where I met God. I met God in the need to change my attitude. Because suddenly, and I always kind of understood where the first workers who'd worked through the heat of the day and then the last people come in and they get all paid the same. I understood. But suddenly I was living out the bitterness and the jealousy of seeing goodness poured on someone else that wasn't me. And God met me there too. And the way that God met me is he sent my daughter back over to the table. My little Leah bounces up to the table and models for me the attitude that God wanted me to have. First, Leah says, Mom, can you believe we made it here? Can you believe how much the buyers gave to me? She said, I can buy a new cage and I could buy a watering system and I'm going to be able to buy my rabbits. You and Dad won't have to. She was bouncing up and down. She was so happy. You see, in that moment I thought, oh, well, Leah knows where to look. We're always going to feel dissatisfied if we're forever comparing ourselves to other people. But if we simply look at what God has put into our hands, and if we look for the blessings in our lives, and if we keep our eyes on God and what God is doing with us, we're going to feel like our cup is overflowing, because it is. Our cup was overflowing that day. We didn't deserve to be there. We hadn't worked and sweated and studied, and we didn't know our stuff. We just scraped our way in too, and we didn't know any of those buyers. And yet they poured out so much blessing on us, so much, way more than we expected. So if you find yourself in that place where you're like, why is that person and I'm not? Just remember, recenter your heart on what God has put into your hands, on how much God loves you. And that's where your focus needs to be. Okay, but Leah did another thing. She's an incredible kid. She was happy for Trevor. She said, Mom, but did you see Trevor? He's in our 4-H. Oh, did you see how much he got? He has to be so excited. I'm going to go tell him congratulations. And off she bounces to go congratulate Trevor because of how well he did. I thought, well, of course. God would have us be happy whenever he blesses one of our brothers or sisters. We are blessed. We can look at other people and say, isn't it amazing what God is doing? Isn't it amazing the forgiveness, the mercy, the welcome? None of us deserve it, right? None of us deserve it. Even if we came in first place, right? God has given us so many gifts, so much mercy. And it is a gift for all. And so I met God raising livestock and getting to go to an auction, in seeing someone in last place be treated like a reserve grand champion. I saw the way God treats all of us, that no matter when we come, his forgiveness and his love and his mercy are open to everyone. Everyone. And it's nothing that we have earned. It is a gift. May that gift fall into your hands today, my friends. And may you be so grateful for what God is doing for you.